Hey, everybody. I'm here with Carl Rodriguez. Now, Carl, I don't know if I wasn't sure when I was writing up my little social media stuff whether you are the GMologist or you are part of the GMologist podcast. So I'm not sure if I should say that you are of that or you are that. But thanks. You're here to talk about Savage Worlds. But before we get into Savage Worlds, why don't you give a little intro? Let us know kind of what you do in the tabletop space, how you kind of got in the tabletop space, and all that fine good stuff.
All right. So I'm Karl Rodriguez. Yes, I am the GMologist. It's kind of a pun or play on the fact that I am an ologist. My real job has been being a scientist for the last 20 or so odd years. So I work in the field of aging research.
Oh
And
wow.
recently I've transitioned into to work for a biotech company. So I am an ologist. So I thought it's kind of fun, you know, you have geologists, you have gerontologists, so why not GMologist? So that's
Absolutely.
how I came up with that name. It's a bit, I guess, it's a bit conceited, but I don't know. Even the Discord is like the GMologist lab, but my friend created that, so I don't know. It's kind of
Hey, it works. And look, it's better suited on you than someone like me because you can only say you are an ologist as opposed
yeah,
to making up out of thin air. And I remember that makes me think of I listened to the Tolkien professors stuff, and he is a professor, but he's when he kind of put on that moniker, he wasn't trying to give himself some kind of uber authority on Tolkien. It just seemed kind of cute to him, but now kind of he is the Tolkien professor. So,
right.
you do it for long enough and you become it.
And I think it's appropriate, right? So when we GM a game, we do a lot of preparation, and we kind of, even if we're not trained in that field, how many of us have delved into medieval history or archaeology or anthropology or some other science for our game? So we kind of become ologists as we prepare to run games, and I think that kind of works.
Absolutely. What's your gaming story? When did you get into gaming? How
So
did you get
my
into it?
my parents, they bought me the Moldvay basic set back in I want to say Christmas. I feel like I got it Christmas of '79, right? That's probably about right. So and I had a cousin who was interested, and we kind of played it. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We kind of blended together hit points and hit dice. So but it was cool. I'd seen like the monster manual probably on shelves, and my parents picked up on that, so they got me that game from BX. I didn't really play a lot of BX, truth be told, because then you get the monster manual and then the two core books in the next couple of years for uh, AD&D. So I
AD&D,
played
right?
AD&D for a long time. Transition, played. When they released the Gray Forgotten Realms box, I dove into the Forgotten Realms. We played like long campaigns, and we even went through the horrible painful transition to 2E with the Avatar Crisis.
All right.
Yeah, so but we had a lot of fun with that. I think our biggest campaign was using the one of the I guess the in high school we played a lot, right? So the Oriental Adventures book, um, and that was we played a long time with that system in that world. So that was our main game, and we took characters from first level into the teens, right? So using the Forgotten Realms card tour box set and all the adventures, the whole series of the OA stuff. So and
Nice.
then in college it kind of, and the other game we played, though, the other game I played other than D&D, though, was Star Frontiers. I remember fondly playing Star Frontiers. It was like the sci-fi game that we would play. I didn't know anything about Traveler, honestly, until I got to college. And then once in college I learned, there's people from all over, and they bring all their games, and then I learned about games more than Star Frontiers and D&D, and got into Traveler and other games. Cyberpunk was big, for example. So Shadowrun,
Never gotten to Cyberpunk. I kind of got into Shadowrun a
yeah.
bit. Um,
But those were
Cyberpunk
the
would have been
games of
cool.
the 80s kind of games, right, that I get into. And I guess I've stayed with it. I think I probably, getting into this community, this kind of really cool Discord community. I think I was brought back in Jason Hobbs of Hobbs and Friends,
All right.
and
Yeah.
Random Screed, and he invited me to one of his games, I think the Kalmata game, and I joined it, and I met a lot of great people. Got on the Audio Dungeon Discord, had tried to, the last few years been trying to be as active as possible. And it's been pretty fun. It's been really neat to get back into it, see the wider community other than the people you kind of play with.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
At
That's
home.
that is one of the cool things of the internet, right? Is you kind of get to
Yeah.
get out of or look beyond the space. Because normally, I mean, back in the day kind of thing, you really only had exposure to your group and maybe another group if you bounced around, but you would kind of find a spot and then you would just be in there until either you moved or that gaming group dissolved, and you might find another one. But now you really get to find a lot about what other people are doing. What kind of stuff do you talk about on the GMologist podcast?
On the GM, I think mainly I talk about recaps of the games that I run or play in, and I just kind of started the GMologist back in May of last year, because I call into a lot of shows that people who podcast, on
Anchor.
From the Audio Dungeon Discord, Anchor podcast, other Spotify podcasts or whatever, and so I call in a lot. And one of my friends suggested, one of the people I call into the show said, why don't you do your own podcast, instead of going on a diatribe for like 6 minutes at a time. I mean, not that they don't mind the calls, but
No, sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you have enough to say, right? Might as well say it on your own space where you can really put as much time and thought into it. So what are you playing now? Yeah.
So the recaps, right, is like the main thrust, but I try to throw in, from behind the screen, especially the games that I run, like what's going on, what's my thought process. So I mean, there may be some gems in there, and it's not just like a blow by blow, play by play. I try to give an overview. So I hope that works. And then of course, people have called in, so I respond to call-ins. And we've had this right now. We've had this ongoing controversy of DM as an adversary to the players. So it's been pretty cool.
So what's the controversy? Some people really like to buy into that the GM is actively, in that kind of adversarial, or I'm sort of curious because I guess for myself, I've never been around folks who really bought into that beyond kind of the jokes sort of thing, right? The kind of the meme of like, ha ha ha, like I'm going to kill you now, or whatever. But I don't remember running into anybody who actually took that seriously as like, no, really, I'm trying to kill you kind of thing.
Well, I think that's the perception, is that, from way back when you have the save or suck kind of mechanic in BX and AD&D, that the GM is out to get you. And in the DMG, there's some of the writing there would suggest that, but then you kind of, if you take it out of context, sure, it's going to sound adversarial, but you keep reading and it is end up being like, funny, haha, I'm being a little sarcastic here. You're not going to go and wipe out the party because clearly you don't have a game, right? And then, but then like that criteria of the save or suck mechanic, it still exists, and even in D&D 5e, one big thing we're talking about is Tomb of Annihilation, this deadly trap, or actually the whole tomb is filled with deadly tricks and traps, and it's such a change from the regular way people have been playing this campaign for that whole time, and it's not adversarial though. That's just the way the game is.
It is called the Tomb of Annihilation.
right. Just like the Tomb of Horrors, right? So, but So I guess my conclusion, I think a lot of people feel that this is just, propaganda, for the lack of a better term. It's really not. I mean, there might be some GMs. You might have the anecdotal story of GMs at a convention that are really, down on killing all the players. Yeah, I got a TPK. Or the Call of Cthulhu GM who's like, yeah, everyone went crazy. But I don't think that's the way.
I don't think most people.
I don't think so.
Because it's hard. I think some GMs. I mean, in my experience, right, some GMs like to be really challenging and make it just difficult, and that's just kind of their jam. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they're trying to be. I guess when I feel like a GM's trying to kill you is when they're taking those sort of unfair things. They're sort of bending the rules to do it, as opposed to they run kind of a tough game. Like, hey, this game is on difficulty 8, so that's where it is. Or am I trying to literally fudge dice or do things or bend the rules or do whatever I'm to try to kill you, like that. But we're not here to talk about that right now.
Yep, it would be fun. That's another one.
I'm happy to have you back to talk about that. But what we're here to talk about today is Savage Worlds. Now, I mentioned this before we went live, and I didn't have a chance. You went and got some props, which is cool because I can't wait to see those. I do have the book somewhere around here in a box somewhere. Is Savage Worlds. I confess it's one of those things that's in, I guess, in board games, they talk about your kind of your shelf of shame where the board games are that you haven't played yet. Savage Worlds is in sort of my RPGs of shame where I haven't had a chance to really read it, but I've always been interested in it. I think I always heard of it as, and I said this also use the same comparison, which I don't think is a good one in terms of what the actual game is like mechanically, but kind of that GURPS in that, hey, you can do kind of anything with the system. You learn this core set of rules, and maybe like Fate or something is maybe a better example where you can then take that and they have all kinds of settings you can use. I know they've licensed some settings and they have a bunch of settings, different genres, and then you can also do it yourself. But that's about as far as I got. So you reached out when I put out the call back on the audio dungeon of, hey, I want to come in and talk about Savage Worlds. So what would be your, or I guess what is your pitch on Savage Worlds?
Yeah, I think I have three main reasons why I go to Savage Worlds a lot. I play and run Savage Worlds. I always love playing. And the first one is that it plays better than it reads. And that sounds weird. And I did not coin this phrase. This is a phrase coined by Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast. But it, like, when you look at it, and even when I was first learning about Savage Worlds, I'm like, what? You have cards and dice, and the dice are different? What does that mean? And what are these bennies things? But then when you play it, it really works well at the table. And I think that's a very cool. It's very visual. It's very tactile. I think people end up loving, the card mechanic for action cards. So just briefly, rules wise, so you have this deck of cards, your standard deck of cards you can get anywhere. Of course, they have, for every single game that they put out, they have a special deck of cards, but you can use any deck of cards with jokers in it, and that's how you do initiative. Is the high card wins, and jokers have a special effect. And people, I mean, it's like playing blackjack. People are like at the table, like, oh yes, I got an ace, or joker, yay, type of thing. And then with the dice, so you have like this kind of dice chain, and you have your skills and your attributes go from D4 to D12. You can go above that, but then you just don't add dice. Although I guess you could add like the in your home game as a homebrew, you could add like the those weird dice from DCC, like D14. You could do that because it's like D12 plus 2 after that. Anyway, sorry. But then your skills and your attributes are kind of rated by those different dice. So you take that dice, and then if you're a special character or wild card, also special adversaries have a D6, and you roll those dice, and you try to get a 4. That's the base mechanic. You try to get a 4 or higher on the dice that you roll. So obviously, if you have a D4 in the skill, it's only a 25% chance. It gets better, with the D6 to 50%, etc. And the cool thing is that when you get the highest number on that dice, you get what is called an ace, and you roll again, and you add that number to your original dice. So you can get higher than a 4, and sometimes you need that to get a raise. You can do more damage, or you can get more information from a skill check from the GM. But it just works really well because people are looking for that payoff, right? So like in AD&D or any D&D game, the D20 game, everyone like gets very excited when they get a crit, right?
Right.
So in this kind of game, people get very excited at the table when you ace a dice, and and especially in damage, you can keep going, right?
That explode, I think they call it exploding die.
Explode, yeah, it's exploding die. So other games have that mechanic, but I think it's just more prevalent in Savage Worlds. And I think
how do the cards and dice work together?
So the cards would be like your initiative
Okay.
for action cards, right? And there's some things called edges, which are like feats or talents that you can maybe draw multiple cards, right? There's subsystems that really work well off that card mechanic. So it's not, so you can use that card mechanic for initiative and combat, but then if you're doing like a skill challenge, you do it for the order of how people go at the table.
Right.
You could do that. You could use it in the chase scene to set up the chase, and then certain things happen with the cards. So the cards are used I would say very well. There's other games that use cards only, but I think the blend of the cards and the dice really works, and that's what I mean.
I've been really coming around.
Very cumbersome. It sounds very cumbersome.
Yeah,
but at the table, it just kind of melds together well, I think.
I mean, I totally feel you on a couple things. Well, one on the playing versus reading. Like I do read throughs and stuff on the channel, and I always try to talk about like this is me reading it, and oftentimes stuff that may read brilliantly well might fall flat when you actually get to play it. And some stuff just doesn't play or just doesn't read that well, either because, frankly, some of the stuff is written by folks who are not professional writers and just it's not their strength, and so they may not be good, or just sometimes you just got a lot going on and it can read kind of clunky. But then, like you're saying, when you actually play it, that clunkiness disappears in maybe how they're describing it, and the beauty of the particular mechanic comes through. And then also on the cards, there's a lot of neat things. I forget the other system that I was reading recently that had integrated cards, but there's kind of a lot of cool stuff you can do because you got the numbers, you have the colors, you've got the suits, and you can really combine a lot of that so that in one card pull, you're not just drawing, 1 through ace or ace through whatever. It's also, is it red or is it black? Is it a clubs? Is it a diamonds? Is it a hearts? Is it whatever? Like you can kind of have 4 different or 3 or 4 different variables just on that one very clean pull. And then there's that concept of, that's also really intriguing is, do you have kind of a deck mechanic where are you shuffling and redrawing every time, or are you pulling stuff out of the deck? And you can have a lot of fun with how that stuff works. That is, can't really do it with dice, right? You draw you roll a 6, you kind of have to, you could say to yourself, okay, well, I can't roll a 6 again. If I roll another 6, roll again, but it's a little bit clunky. Whereas if you just pull a card out of your hand and then put it in a discard, that card is gone, and you have the deck, and you don't have to worry about remembering or marking something. It's in your discard. It's gone. So a lot of neat stuff. I assume that there are, or maybe I shouldn't assume, there are abilities and things that kind of key off stuff like are there certain powers that will, if you draw a card or allow you to do something different with the cards or manipulate them in some way?
Right. So I think, as far as like action cards and initiative goes, there are some edges, that's what they're called in the game, that allow you to draw more than one card, for example. And there are certain things that happen, say with a club versus an ace. So so it kind of depends on probably depends on the game where you have these kind of little minutia. But I know from the GM's point of view, like there's a whole section on encounter building, and it's kind of more or less throughout all the different types of games they have, and that is, you can just use cards to generate an adventure, right? Like you draw a set of cards, and if you get, depending on the suit, this color or this number, this is kind of what what you can get or what you can choose from as you generate a random adventure. And I've done that, like, in preparation for a game. I don't have anything going on. They're doing like the equivalent of a hex crawl, through the territory or whatever. And I just, okay, what's going to happen? And it'll tell you like the adversary, the situation, the monster, in some cases, even in some games I've seen, like the type of building that you're going to be investigating. So
Oh,
it's
that's
kind of
really
a
cool.
neat.
Is that in the core book, or is that in different setting books?
In the core book they have an encounter builder as well, but in the
Oh,
setting
nice.
books for sure they have, every setting's different. It's like, you have
Right.
a random. It's like, almost imagine random encounter charts for some of the OSR type of games, specific for each thing. So
Richard Cordell's in the chat talking about the market is overflooded with RPGs. So you can't find players. Even the established popular RPGs are hard to find players. I don't know. Is it hard to find players? Maybe. I'm not sure if you're looking in the right spots. I feel like the bigger problem, not so much can't find players overall. I think everyone's just on different platforms, right? Some people are on Roll20, some people are on Fantasy Grounds, some people are on Discord. I feel like if you set up a game, and maybe that I should caveat saying I think it's hard maybe to find I want to say good players that suit the game you're running. I feel like just finding players, if you're a GM, I kind of think, not to, it may depend on a lot of factors, but I just see so often people are looking for games, just dying to get into games. I feel like if you go out there and you promote your game, now maybe if you are playing a system that is more niche, and probably Savage Worlds in the larger scheme of things is kind of niche, maybe you might not get a lot of people who are just dying to play Savage Worlds just because they don't know about it, right? But and this is what I hope these kinds of series will do, that maybe someone, you want to run Savage Worlds and someone can say, hey, watch this video, or Karl's going to tell you all cool stuff about Savage Worlds. But I don't know. I haven't found in my experience it's hard to find players, but I suppose it also depends on how sort of picky you are. So that was point number 1, the dice and the cards, dual mechanics.
Yeah, the dual mechanic is neat. And there is a meta currency. They're called bennies, so they allow you a reroll.
Is that kind of like inspiration in 5e?
Well, I think inspiration 5e doesn't allow like a reroll, right? It just gives you like a bonus extra points on the. I guess
You
it
know, and I
depends on
can't
the
actually
table.
remember.
Depends on the
I
table,
can't actually remember this point.
right? It's kind of more, yeah. It's kind of more like in a 2D20 system where you use momentum to re-roll dice, type of thing. So you re-roll
Okay.
the dice. The cool thing in Savage Worlds is that if you take the better of the two. It's not like in some games where you take, like in Warhammer Fantasy, if you use like a fortune point and you roll, that's what you
You have
get.
to take the second roll,
Yeah,
right?
you
Yeah,
have to
that,
take
yeah.
the
A lot of
second roll.
games use that. You got to take the
So,
second one regardless of
and
what it is.
so the GM gets meta currency too. He gets bennies based on how many people are at the table. But that's one of the strategies I've noticed in gameplay too, is that there is sort of a meta game strategy to get the GM to use all their bennies, for re-rolls or to soak damage or whatever. But there,
So
it's
now,
really
right?
the bennies can do multiple things. That's
Okay.
that's
So one thing that I know people have struggled with the inspiration for the edition is that they left it so mechanically vague, right? It's kind of like, well, you can kind of give them if you want to, kind of thing. Like, hey, and so a lot of GMs forget about them, or just it's more of a hassle than it's worth. With the Benny system, did they give more clear cut guidance on,
Well,
here's when you should give them, or how that works to
you
encourage
start
people
out
to
with
use them?
3, and I
Okay.
think, and the cool thing too, if I can get this prop
Is
out.
it starting out like your campaign, like you get 3 when you create your
No, the
character, or is it 3 every session?
three
Or
per session,
all right,
and you
well, that's
can't
good.
carry them over. You can get more
Gotcha.
bennies for doing cool things as you would, but the cool thing is, like, they kind of, how do I get my thing on the camera? There
Let
it
me
is.
see. Maybe I can put
Camera.
you in the. Can I put you in the big? Hold on. Oops. No, that's the. Let me see if I can reverse. Wait, oh, here we go.
So like these are bennies. You can, and a lot of the games have like props like poker chips. So right, they kind of double down on the analogy to playing cards. So you have poker chips to use as bennies. So I think that helps the visually to remind players at the table, like on Roll20 or whatever. They also have they have mods or add-ons that you can
Nice.
put bennies on the table too, and you can so it's kind of cool that you can do that stuff and then encourage because that's, I think, to me, is one of the funnest parts of these games with meta currencies, like the back and forth between the GM and the player on your meta currency. And
Yeah,
they do have.
I've been sort of thinking about a system where you actually trade them back and forth. Like, say the PCs have 3 bennies at the start of the session, and they can use them, but if they use them, it goes into the GM's pile. So you got that extra thing of like, well, I can use this to get this roll, but now I'm handing one off to the GM, and vice versa. The GM has some, and they decide to use them. That goes into the player's pile. It just seems like there's a lot of cool ways to have fun, and I always love those kind of risk reward things. Like, if I use this now, am I going to give this to the GM where they're going to unleash it on me at kind of the worst? Because that's the other thing that's nice.
Like, if you want to buy a benny for a benny, right, type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, you can.
Or you roll it. Well, I think there's probably an option where if you roll a critical failure, like a 2 1s, snake eyes, then the GM can get a benny back to you. So
yeah, I think you could have a lot of fun with it. And then it's that thing. I don't remember if we'd started the stream or not. I think we had, because because you're talking about on your channel or on your podcast, the whole adversarial GM. Is those meta currencies allow GMs to have some fun being adversarial in a way that's bounded and kind of understood, right? Because if I, as a player, okay, I do some or whatever, I know the GM has a benny. I know the GM's going to use it at the best time for them, for their NPC or whatever, which means it's the worst time for me. But it's within the scope of the rules.
Right.
It's within everything. So I know it's out there. I know it could possibly, happen, as opposed to, I don't know what's going on, but stuff's just getting, worse. So I think those things are kind of fun because, let's face it, as a GM, it is kind of fun when you get to kind of drop the hammer or just press your party, but you don't want to get out of hand. What kind of things? So besides rolling dice, is there anything else that they use bennies for? Do they kind of push the envelope at all on that, or is it just?
It's really like a meta currency. So you can re-roll dice. So when a player gets injured, they can soak the damage by spending a benny, and then they have to make a roll on one of their attributes called vigor. So they can use it to soak damage, because then it's a simple damage system. When you take damage, you're shaken. If you take +4, then you get a wound, and every 4 after that is a wound.
Okay, so you do have some kind of hit points, but they kind of structure differently.
At 4 wounds, you're incapacitated, no matter what.
And what is armor in the game? Is it kind of damage reduction, or
armor is damage reduction?
Okay.
So
Cool.
there's like weapons that have, in the sci-fi games, they have weapons that have AP, or there's magical powers. Like in Deadlands, you have like Ghost Bullet, which is AP 6, right? It's like your plasma gun. But so that's pretty
Deadlands
cool.
is their that's their kind of Western,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
Western. Is it like Western horror? It's like Western mixed with
It's
something.
like Western magic and horror, supernatural.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it which is your favorite of the settings?
Well, that
Of the
brings
kind
me
of
to my next
Oh,
point.
sorry, didn't mean to jump ahead. All right,
It's
let's hit
okay.
it.
So I think the next cool thing about Savage World is, like you did mention, like Fate or GURPS, it's universal. And Pinnacle, the company that creates it, I want to also state I do not work for Pinnacle. Haven't published any Savage Worlds. I just really like it. I mean, I definitely know some of the authors, and just for the person answering, asking about games. So small cons like Genghis Khan in Denver and Chupacabra Con in Austin, because of the population of authors in those two cities, have a lot of Savage Worlds games.
Oh, well, there you go.
So if you're in that area, I'm sure.
I'm
there's
also
other,
happy to take a sponsorship from Savage Worlds or Pinnacle, but I am not sponsored. So this is just two folks talking about a game.
right.
They want to just spotlight a bit.
Yeah. So here's the main core rule book. This is the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition.
Hold on,
That's
let
kind
me
of what
put
I've
you in
been
the big
playing.
screen for a sec so we can
Yeah.
get that. There we
The
go.
Savage Worlds Adventure Edition is the one with the Yeti on the cover, about to munch on this poor hero.
Now, what is the Adventure Edition? Because like I mentioned before, I have a copy.
It's the latest edition.
Okay, so they're not numbering them; they're kind of giving them these different monikers.
Yeah, the different monikers. I honestly don't remember. The good thing that they have done is, even if the game is from a previous edition, they have like a document on how to convert.
Okay,
Like,
are they making kind of serious changes, like on the scale of like I don't know, BX to first edition, or like third to fourth? Like how serious are they?
It's more like 3 to 3.5. It's like,
Okay.
compressing the skills, for example, clarifying how certain things work. I think, for example, they so you can't get so there used to be this mechanic in combat that made it even deadlier than it can be, where you can just keep getting more and more raises on an attack, and now that's capped, right? So
What were they just finding?
advanced.
People were just getting hammered just way
Yeah,
too hard.
yeah. Yeah, there's that one chance that the monster can now roll an extra 3d6 on you or something, and you only have right there. So anyway, I guess it's good for the players occasionally too, but and then they've also they've advancement. It's a little simpler.
Okay.
Advanced. So they used to have, like, you have to get X number of, a certain number of XP, get certain number of XP per adventure, certain number of XP to hit an advance, and then you use an advance, and then you got to get. It just So now it's just
too complicated.
Yeah, now it's just like it's up to the GM when they want to give an advance. In my experience, a lot of GMs just give an advance for every session, or you could give an advance if you want to slow things down for every adventure or every milestone in an adventure.
So, okay, I was going to say, that sounds pretty much like the milestones that they introduced officially, I guess, in 5th edition. I can't remember if 4th edition had milestones or not. All right. So now let's get into it. So, yeah, so this
myriad of worlds, right?
Myriad of worlds. Now, is it, because I know there's probably, with all these kind of systems, I have Fate's another book that I've read. I have read some of it, but I haven't actually played it. There's always that kind of how, universal is it really, right? GURPS, I think it was advertised you could play from cavemen all the way to alien beings, but how well it did any one of those particular settings, probably up to some debate. With Savage Worlds, do you feel like that it does a really good job of being able to at least be adapted? I'm assuming there are tweaks for all the different settings, especially ones in different genres and whatnot, but that it is a really solid core for all these different things, from, say, Deadlands onto, I don't know, steampunk onto sci-fi or fantasy.
I think so. I haven't really run into something that I haven't thought didn't work, because they modify things to give a feel, right? And I mean, I don't have all the props to, but I'll show what I have, and maybe this will answer the question from Brian Gross, who just put in something. But let's look at the different type of genres that you can use, right?
Oh yeah, he was saying, I think, in terms of if you're trying to get somebody maybe to play Savage Worlds, and you find that if you found that when you went into a forum or putting a posting that you say, hey, we're going to play Savage Worlds, that might either not bring people in or I suppose actively off-put people, that you could instead say, hey, I want to play a sci-fi, steampunk, crazy, whatever game. And then when people flock to it because it sounds amazing, then, you reveal, haha, and we'll be playing this in Savage Worlds.
Right.
And then, see how many people run away. Hopefully none.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody sticks around.
I think that definitely can work, right? So.
Oh, and Brian Gross been using GURPS for all genres since 1990.
Yeah.
You're a brave man, Brian Gross. I
maybe I
appreciate
gotta
your
get him on
moxie.
to talk
Absolutely.
about sell GURPS,
Absolutely.
right?
Drop me a line and we can talk. You can sell me on GURPS, which I don't know where my old GURPS books is. I loved it a lot back in the day.
Yeah.
Didn't get to play as much as I wanted, but it's been forever. But it sticks in my mind. So, what are of the was that something that brought you to Savage Worlds? So I guess maybe what originally attracted you to Savage Worlds? I don't know if you saw it physically or digitally or, what brought you in? Was it the kind of, did you get a sense of the mechanics that you really liked? Was it the fact that you could run all these different settings? Was it just happenstance?
So I think the first Savage Worlds, I've seen it played and I've heard about it. And it's actually pretty recent. But I was at a convention and a couple of the authors were running a game. I can name them, right?
Sure.
So Sean and Robin Bircher, they do a lot of stuff for Savage Worlds. And they've actually are responsible for the Rippers line, which is like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in the late 19th century. And they ran a game of Rippers. And to me, they had like they had a lot of props. So that probably draws you to the game, right? And but they ran it. It was really cool to see how they integrated all the different mechanics as well as like all the visuals in the game. I think that's what drew it to me. And actually, I guess we're skipping points because my third point was that it's really intuitive and easy for new players to pick up. So when I played, I felt like it was really easy to pick up. And even like in some of my groups that I run now, I think the coolest one is so speaking to Brian's point about the best approaches to advertise the genre. We have friends that we've had Sunday dinner with for years. Like we've known these people for like 10 years. They know I game, but they've never asked or wanted to game. And then finally they did. And I said, well, what kind of game do you want to play? Here's the options. And when I mentioned the game Deadlands, like, well, what's that? And it's a Western game. It's like supernatural horror. And they're like, yeah, I want to play that. And then when they played it, I mean, these people have never played an RPG before, and they've picked it up really well. I mean, one of the players, even who's never played, is playing a very complex character who's like a spellcaster and uses a rifle, right?
Ooh.
So it's pretty like they're calling him a hex slinger. So they're like, you can imagine what if Doc Holliday had made his own cult of people who were mages who inscribed runes on their rifles.
Nice.
Right?
I can imagine it. I can
Yeah,
definitely imagine it.
so I think it's really easy to play. My wife, who's just got into RPGs, also joined in with Sean and Robin's game back at that convention and has picked it up. Is now a big fan of Savage Worlds, one of her go-to games too. And she had never played RPGs, so I think, and even for like an astute RPG player, well, even better for like an astute RPG player who's been playing forever, like a 5e player that you see a lot of see a lot nowadays. They can just go there and just pick it up. And I think so it's an easy game, I think, to pick up at the table. Just for
there's a lot to be said for that. And it's one of the things that's been a little bit, I want to say, shocking about 5th edition's just explosion, because I don't find 5th edition super easy to play. I mean, and I guess, or maybe I should say there's a lot of complexity kind of hidden, and you don't have to, maybe you don't have to engage it. I think a lot of the internet community loves to engage it, all those mechanics and the way they go, oh, I have my reaction, I have my action, all like that stuff but maybe I guess as a new player, you can just kind of spit out what you do and the GM will make sense of it and not worry. But it's definitely something that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough, I think, when it comes to RPGs. It's just kind of how easy is it to get somebody who may not have ever played an RPG before to play it, and right? And I know it's something that I have a hard time understanding, because I've just been playing the games forever. So I know all the lingo. I know what they mean. I know all that stuff, but you got to put yourself in a new player's shoes sometimes. So it's cool that you've had really good experiences sort of bringing folks in. I kind of did a similar thing with my BX home game, which is sort of a modified BX, but maybe one of my players, I think, was a fifth edition kind of player,
Mhm.
and everyone else was sort of brand new. So I really kind of had to walk them through everything. Um, it's really a really fascinating experience. Now, was that the Rippers game at the convention? Was that your first? That was your first introduction
Right.
to Savage Worlds, and that was obviously your first setting that you played in Savage Worlds
Right.
at that game.
And that's, like I said, it's like 18th century, or sorry, 19th century League of Extraordinary Gentlemen going through the jungles and all this kind of stuff, right? And I agree with Brian, right, that it's good to have pre-gens, and something cool that these guys have done. Like, I'm showing some props because I have them here, for like the East Texas University setting, which is like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer or whatever. But they do have pre-gens, and in this kind of card like format, and they have this, both this PDF and as actual cards, and they have them for a lot of their games.
Oh,
This is
nice.
like your frat brother. It's just two-sided. It's got his abilities and gear and everything and all what you got to roll. So they really do a good job of having these pre-gens set up, and you can just pick up the game and go. And that's part of Pinnacle's commitment to this game. This is a game that I'm referring to, by the way,
Oh,
the
wow,
East
let me get
Texas
you the full.
University. So
Okay.
this is like horror if you were like at Texas A&M. Although
I mean, the
actually,
horror of
so
just being at Texas A&M, or horrible things happening at Texas
no,
A&M.
it's set like in East Texas, but actually, it's actually what my friend said. It's because they have their Aggies, and they're both their kids went to A&M. Like, it's not really East Tech. It's not really A&M. It's actually like Stephen F. Austin University,
Oh,
which is a small
yeah,
college in a small town in East Texas.
burn.
But no, it actually is. I don't know if the author's from there, but it is very close to the
That's
geography
hilarious.
and the aesthetic of that small town. But that's cool. You could play like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer type game,
Absolutely.
which is
So,
kind of
what was
neat.
the next setting that you picked up? So
Um,
you got a taste of Rippers.
yeah. So the next setting I picked up was actually I only have it in PDF, but it's called Ultima Forsan, and it is a setting. I ran a small mini campaign of it, and Ultima Forsan is what if the zombie apocalypse took place in the Renaissance in
Oh,
Italy.
okay, so kind of like Dark Ages Cthulhu sort of things.
Yeah. So, but you're like, it's like the zombie plague is like destroyed most of the world. There's only these small enclaves, apocalyptic a la, points of light like D&D, right?
Right.
So, so then you have these people who go out there into the wilds and try to recover artifacts from before the plague, right? So I think the adventure was really cool because I think the players got to go into like flooded Venice to find some clues, and I think they're looking for something related to Da Vinci, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Of course. So,
How
but
could
it
it
was it was
not
really
be?
fun. It was really fun. It was crazy. You had like, so it was like kind of like a Renaissance clockwork type stuff. They had a fight
Now,
like that. It was fun.
it sounds awesome. Now, did you find the transition from Rippers to the Renaissance game? Because obviously, I'm sure they have to take that core system and they have to make, Rippers had its own customizations, and then you have to kind of forget them or put them aside and learn the customizations for this Renaissance game. Did you find that an easy transition? Because I think that's important with these games that are trying to be sort of universal, have a lot of settings, that
Mhm.
it's fairly easy to go from, oh, I've been playing this one for a few weeks. Now we're going to play this other one. And I don't feel like I have to relearn, a whole system over again.
Right. So there's usually like a uh, 2 pages in like the document for the new game, or the genre game, and it says, well, these are the edges that are available. These are the skill changes. These are hindrances that may or may not be allowed. Hindrances are like disadvantages, right?
Okay.
And that's kind of it. If it doesn't say it's not allowed, then it's allowed, right? Like you wouldn't have like computer skill or hacking skill in Deadlands, right? Right. So
No, it would be a different kind of hacking.
right.
It would be literally like hacking with like a small axe.
Yeah. So,
You know.
they have things like that, and I think that's very helpful. And so like I even like this other game here
Oh,
that I
oops, let
just
me
picked
get
up,
you in the
and
brief.
they have really great production values and stuff. This is
Yeah, the art looks
Deadlands,
really nice.
Deadlands Lost Colony. So this is like your space cowboy in the far. So it's like the Deadlands universe, but in the far future, and they're stuck on
Oh,
a
okay.
planet. So it's
Oh,
like
because I was gonna say it's got that kind of vibe of
yeah,
the kind of what's his name on Mars, John Carter.
yeah, John Carter, but a little bit of Serenity, Firefly, I would
Oh,
say. So, and that one too. Like, I love these box sets. These box sets have the specific bennies for the game. Like the bennies in here are like purple and little poker chips, and They come with dice, and they come with like what's really great is all these cards that so if someone wants to make their own character, they can, but if they don't, if they don't and they just want to jump in, you have all these pre-made characters. I think that's cool.
Yeah, the pre-made stuff is great. I really feel like that was one of the. I don't know if that was the best thing 5th edition did, but those starter sets that kind of had everything you needed to play, pre-gens, slimmed down version of the rules, a decent adventure, and was fairly cheap. I mean, when people would ask, like, "Oh my gosh, I'm looking at these core books and I want to try D&D, but if I feel like I got to buy all 3 of them, it's like $100 in books." I'm like, or you could just spend $20 on the starter kit, test it out, see if you like it. You get dice, you get an adventure, like you get more practical stuff than you will. I mean, as much as I love the kind of stuff they put in the DMG, you do not need that as a first time GM, and the monster manual may be more monsters than you need. So I always think the box sets are really, really great. Is there one system that you love above all that you've run or played in? You have to pick one.
One of the
settings.
Yeah, I think so. It's probably honestly Deadlands. So this is the Deadlands box here, right? So the Weird West, and they did they did some Kickstarters and stuff. They're actually doing their own crowdfunding now. Like they're not going through Kickstarter. I think for the recent Supers one, it's like here's all the stuff that comes in that Deadlands box, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of nice stuff.
Yeah.
And once we're finally done with coronavirus, I think all those being able to play in person, have lots of those props.
Yeah, because they have these the things you can't use. I mean, even though you get the PDF for them, because they send you the PDF that's a good thing about Pinnacle, and a lot of companies do that. If you buy the product, they send you the PDF. So they have like these little cardboard cutouts that you can put on stands and use like on a map or a grid. And you can copy paste them to Roll20, but it's kind of not the same. Like like I think we in the group, in the Deadlands Sunday group, like they've got this like a armored stagecoach now, because they're getting pretty advanced. And my wife made a prop for that armored stagecoach that we could put on like stands, so they really get into it, and I agree, if you play live. But Deadlands has been the game I've run and played Deadlands probably the most out of any 7 world game.
So what would you say? I mean, other than the fact that it's Wild West horror, weird horror, what would be your kind of elevator pitch for Deadlands specifically?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think if you want to play in the Old West with some really weird and gunslinging, card playing, I think Deadlands is a game for you.
Is it a particular era of Wild West? Are they going for kind of
it's like post Civil War, so 1880s, 1890s.
So kind of Wyatt Earp and
yeah.
What did they? Is it take place in sort of a spin-off quasi historical U.S. West?
Yeah.
Is it a totally made up? Okay, so it's
a quasi. So it's like the Civil War was longer than it was, and although the states are now together, there's definitely still tension. And then they have this magical, like instead of gold, the big MacGuffin is something called Ghost Rock, which is this magical demonic, infused power source. So they have like weird science, in there as well as magic. And
how do they deal with, if any, some of the things? It can be sensitive. I mean, kind of sensitive things like Native Americans and sort of minorities like the Asians and African Americans and things kind of in the West. Do they just put a disclaimer? Do they talk about it at all? Do they have anything?
They do talk about it in this latest. They kind of revamped Deadlands very recently, and of course they took a lot of flack for it. But I think the new version is more, it's more sensitive to those topics, and so that it's a different feeling, to it, and I think it makes it more inclusive. Nice. Right? I think even the art is reflected in that. They have a lot more, I would say, women and people of color in the artwork. And it's
that's good to hear.
It's very,
you're playing in a fantasy version anyway. Let's let everybody enjoy it.
Right. Sure.
I'm trying
So
to think. So
I
I know
think it's
we. Oh
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
because you're right. Those topics, and there's still conflict. You can still have conflict, right? You can still have, Lakota as enemies or maybe friends, just depending on on how you approach it, right? They still want to, in the old west, they're still a political entity, and even more so now with magic and etc. Right? So you could still have those kind of conflicts. I think this version, they definitely make an effort, and I think it's a very strong effort to make things inclusive.
Oh,
I would say
that is good.
and diverse, right? So.
I was gonna say, so did we skip over a little bit of? I don't want to think we need to backtrack. Do you feel like you covered your?
Oh well, the last one I think I
Oh,
haven't
you
gotten
have
into
something.
it quite yet.
No, go
Like
for
I
it.
said, mirror, and they so this is something like probably that goes into. I feel like they could probably make a version of Savage World for anything, but this is riffs, right?
Oh
So
yes,
they have the
I should have
Savage
even thought of
riffs,
riffs. I've brought up
yeah,
riffs a few times
yeah,
because
and here's the back, all the stuff that you get in it. Again,
oh, that
so
looks nice.
it's really cool, and
No,
there's more books
yeah.
that are not just in. There are more books that are in here too. So
Have you done much with it? Because I've heard that, and again, I don't know if my information is super correct or not. That maybe of the settings or of these different books that maybe there was a wasn't the easiest fit. That there were some. It was a little bit of a clunkier fit with riffs than maybe some of the other ones. At least that's a little bit I heard because I was kind of interested in it somewhat because I was someone who I was playing in a homebrew sci-fi game for a long time, and we used to use a lot of riff stuff, particularly the art. So we would
yeah,
go buy riffs books, but we never actually played
yeah, the
riffs.
art's
But riffs
great. I
always
love
kind of
the
had
art.
we always had a soft spot for kind of riffs material, even though we didn't really
Mhm.
use it. So I was kind of intrigued when Savage Worlds, when this kind of thing came up. But then I did read that it seemed to be maybe not as smooth or clean a fit as maybe some of the other ones. I don't know if you can
Mhm.
speak to or not. I don't even know if my information is good or not. It's stuff from
I
the
know
internet. So,
I played it. I played Riffs at a convention, and it was really cool. I played the Riffs one, um, but again, it's like an author testing out their newest product. I think he was test. I think Sean was testing out one of the North the one of the books that has travel rules for North America. But
mm.
but I haven't. I mean, I've proposed it to my group, and they have like intro adventures we could test out, but I don't think they haven't bitten yet. But I
Oh,
like
really?
riffs. I've always liked the books. I'd love to get it out there.
Yeah,
So
I just wish I would have been able to play the system because it seems like something like I spent probably more money on riffs than I did on a lot of
I know
other systems
I have a lot
but
of
I've
riff
never
stuff.
actually played it.
Yeah, but they do have they. I think probably the hardest thing with riffs is so much there's so much there, right? There's a lot. So how do you have to get like all these different factions with all these different types of character types that they archetypes that they had in the Rips game. So I think that's what's happening. And then so many it's like a multiverse, right? So now you got to pull in, but it looks like they're still supporting it. They just had they're having another box set for like Riffs Atlantis. So this is like Riffs North America. So
How often did they
it's
tend to
successful.
put up new material for these different boxes? Do they tend to just put out a box and then kind of leave it up to? I don't even know if there's third party Savage Worlds publishers. I presume that there are, or do
Yeah,
they
there are.
have some kind of schedule for supporting and creating new stuff for different settings?
I think they put up stuff pretty regular. I mean, clearly things have slowed down, right, because of the pandemic. But I mean, they're actively getting everything up. Like they're revamping like their super or not GURPS. Now we got GURPS in our mind because of Brian. But Savage World Supers is they just released that. They're working on redoing the space. Although you can still use all the space stuff. They have like a 1 to 2 page conversion document, so it's not
Right. Hey,
right. So
GURPS
they're
should be
still
in
there.
everybody's brains.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I've
Have you
enjoyed
tried
it.
out their
Oh
supers? Because that's usually kind of
no,
one of the settings that
I
tends
know.
to break
I want to try
things.
that out to see how it works. I haven't tried that out, but I have tried out. So speaking of properties that they've kind of converted to Savage Worlds,
Mm.
they've converted. They're coming up soon, and all the PDFs are out. But the printing of Savage Pathfinder is coming up,
Whoa.
and
That's
I
an
played
interesting
that.
move. I hadn't heard
Yeah,
about that one.
I liked it. So they definitely kind of all the classes become like archetypes, and they have like a way to set them up and certain if you want to keep this archetype, although you're not bound to it, if you want to go with this archetype, these are the things that you should progressing.
Oh, so I actually didn't even have a chance to ask. Is Savage Worlds kind of class based? Is it skill based? What's it like?
So initially you have like an archetype, but you don't have to, right? The archetypes are only there for the pre-gens, but you can make kind of whatever based on the
But
parameters
when
of the
you're
work.
leveling up, are you leveling up like an entire suite of stuff like a class, or are you leveling up like I want to get this skill better, this attribute goes up, this whatever you're kind of piecemeal
No, so
advancing?
so the advancement is like kind of whatever you want within the purview of the rules. So you can
Okay.
advance an attribute, you can advance some skills, you can get another edge, you can get rid of hindrances, and at each 4, you kind of go up from like they have like different tiers like novice, veteran,
Right.
etc. And every 4 advances, you go up a tier.
Okay, interesting. The a Savage Pathfinder seems really kind of fascinating to me because I'm
It
kind of
was
curious
fun.
like
I
who's
haven't run it. I
I
played
just
it. I
wonder, it's like,
played a
who is it for? Because one of the things I feel like, I played 3.x. I never played Pathfinder as Pathfinders. I played 3 or 3rd edition. I played 3.5, and I always think of Pathfinder as, I don't know, 3.75, at least Pathfinder, 1st edition.
Mhm.
But it seems like those people who stuck with Pathfinder and all this time really like the kind of super crunch everything of that kind of system. I know there were a lot of issues with 2nd edition that came up because they were trying to sort of do a 5th edition kind of distillation of things into at least, even if it's not necessarily simpler at the core of it, but just kind of, I don't know, smooth kind of things out, at least on the surface, that some of those folks, didn't like. So it's curious. It seems like that Savage Worlds isn't like the crunchiest system in the world.
Right. So it might be to get people into Pathfinder who were wary of the
I mean,
crunchiness.
it kind of makes sense
Maybe.
from a Paizo thing, because if you feel like there are people who love the Pathfinder setting, I don't even know what I know Forgotten Realms, right? 5th edition Forgotten Realms, right? Or whatever.
Mm.
I have no idea what the Pathfinder, whatever their setting is. But if you feel like there's an audience who loves the Pathfinder setting, but doesn't love all that crunch, and 2nd edition didn't do it for them, I guess you think like, hey, why not give them a shot at it and see if you can pull them in? I'm just curious from the players who were like, I want my Pathfinder. Why they look at this route? But it is really a cool crossover
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing.
actually in the kind of mini campaign that I played in it, I think it really worked. I played a magus, which is a a fighter magic user with the big 2-handed flaming sword, right? So that's pretty cool. And we had in the mini campaign, I think the modularity of Savage Worlds allowed the GM to kind of have a big pitched battle, right? That you would be very cumbersome and excuse me, I'm going to cough in a 3.5 or Pathfinder system. But Savage Worlds, because of its modularity, you kind of run it as like an extended skill challenge or an extended challenge, and people can do things, different things, including fighting, but that's they're not bound to it. And then we'll see what happens with this, battle, right? And it makes it very tense and tenuous. I thought it was kind of neat how he ran it. And then he was able to blend because he put it in the Pathfinder world in this kind of place where, much like in Expedition to Barrier Peaks, this starship crashed down in that area. So there's this like sci-fi, fantasy, sword and planet type of feel in this area.
Oh,
So I think
nice.
because of the Savage World, I think it's a little. There's a lot of tack on rules, if I remember correctly, in an adventure path that took place in that Pathfinder area, and the Savage World just kind of just meshes together, right?
And they could do a whole. It seems like a really easy way to bridge Starfinder and Pathfinder if you want to, and
Yeah,
something like Savage
right.
Worlds. I mean, I don't know. I thought the idea behind Starfinder was cool, but I never really looked into it because Pathfinder doesn't particularly interest me. Um, so I was like, well, that seems cool. So I don't know if you can, if they made it easy to go Pathfinder to Starfinder, but something like Savage Worlds can be that nice vehicle where you can
Right.
take it into the Old West, or you could take it into whatever, and plus then they could republish all the metric tons of Pathfinder material as Pathfinder
Yeah, I
Savage
think they
Worlds
did.
material.
They're definitely doing like Rise of the Rune Lords, the first Pathfinder adventure
Because I
path.
mean,
I
there's
think they
just so
redid.
much
Yeah,
Pathfinder
I
stuff
know it's a lot.
out there.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
there's a
kind of
lot of stuff.
crazy, but hey, good for them. That's really cool. Are there any other settings that you're following that haven't come out yet, that are or are in the works or whatever, or that you are out but just haven't had a chance to
Oh,
try?
so I'm a big fan of post-apocalyptic.
All right.
So there's a few other ones. So there's a that I haven't gotten to the table, but I have, and they're third party products. So there's one called Ghost Recon. So it's like
With
Savage
Tom
Worlds.
Clancy.
Yeah, Tom Clancy, like Ghost Recon. You're like um, a Savage Worlds setting or Savage Worlds rules, but the setting is modern day sort of espionage, but like team, you know, team type stuff, right? So I think one of the coolest things is the adventure that I'd love to run is like it's a 3-part adventure, but in each phase, like there's an investigative phase where you're police, there's like an escalated phase where you're SWAT, and then there's a final phase where you're like a actual like a SEAL or a mixed kill team, right? Like Delta
Oh,
Forces.
interesting.
So it's kind of cool. It's like it's really neat how they do that, and I think it works because like Savage Worlds, there's different tiers, right? You know, the different tiers kind of work as different levels of expertise, right? So
Right.
you can make things harder as you progress. And then I have a couple. Well, I probably have more than a couple post-apocalyptic settings. Um, one is called. These are all third party again. One is called the After, which is like after an alien invasion, what's left. Um, and I like that one because it does have that old west type of feel in a post-apocalyptic setting. It takes place in like the Rocky Mountains is a start default setting. But then
Oh, nice.
there's another post-apocalyptic that is kind of again, you know, it's kind of based in and around Chicago, and that's one's more like Gamma World, where you have like
Hmm.
mutants and stuff like that. So,
Right.
um, and then there's a biker. I even have a biker one that I guess the main
Also
setting is like
post-apocalyptic,
yeah,
kind of
also
Mad Max.
yeah. So these are all like available in there.
Are you gonna
There's
mash them all together so you can have
I guess you
Mad
could,
Max
right?
in the Rockies after an alien invasion? You know.
Yeah, there you could actually,
I
right?
mean, to me, that's kind of the dream of having that kind of system, right? Is I could take a little bit of like you can kind of set
Just
it
wanted
all up
that.
like a buffet and just take
Mhm.
like I'm going to take this, I'm going to take that, and that they mesh together well enough that I mean that's that kind of thing that I think D&D wants to be for fantasy stuff. Is this you can do anything, right? And people do it. People take it way beyond fantasy, even though it seems like a crazy amount of work. But I feel like the
Mhm.
dream and again, obviously, Brian, who's been playing GURPS since 1990 in every genre, I'm sure loves it about GURPS. But this whole concept of like you can really just take this system and just bolt on, and hey, you can have
Yep.
cavemen, have them fly in a spaceship, then go on a total
Right.
starfaring thing and stay within the same rules. I had to make kind of minimal adjustments.
Right.
So yeah, and I think the
Instead of
idea that you could be
switching
there,
games for each phase, you could run all the way through your,
you can run all the way through.
epic
So
tale.
yeah, or you could take Pathfinder and mix it with bikers from Mad Max and just smash them together and
Mhm.
do a minimal, like you're saying, hey, I just got kind of a couple of pages or a page or two of just a few easy things to kind of swap, and I
Yeah,
can
I'll take
run
the
with it.
biker gang rules from this system, and now your your peaceful little village at the base of the Rocky Mountains is invaded by biker gangs, right?
Right. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like I think it's what my mind comes to when I think of these kind of systems. Like how much of
Yeah.
this stuff can I really just smush smush together? Brian Gross is almost like Torg. Torg is another system that I
Yeah, I'm
have no
not familiar with
experience
that one.
with.
Yeah.
I've seen the books. I can picture the logo in my brain, but I don't
Mhm.
know, something it never clicked with me. Whenever I would see them when I used to go into more gaming shops, it just never clicked over with me for
Yeah.
whatever reason. I wonder if they're still writing it or producing it. It's one of those kind of funny things. I felt like Rifts was a little bit like that, where I would kind of wonder who's playing Rifts. I mean, and not to throw shade on Rifts because I've seen that like it would have sizable space at the gaming store. But it was
Right.
one of those things that you'd see all these books and all this stuff, and I go, wow. And I used to buy some of them, but I never heard anybody playing Rifts. I never saw like, hey, we're playing Rifts. We need a new player, whatever. It's just one of those systems that always was there, but I never actually, for whatever reason, never stumbled in the actual community of players. And I feel like Torg is like that, where I would see all these Torg books, but I would never like look around. I'd never see anybody else browsing the Torg books or see people playing Torg. But it could have just been where I was living. Obviously, they published them and continued to publish them for
Yeah.
a long time. So someone must have been buying them.
Yeah, I think maybe that's why Rifts has kind of allowed for the Savage Worlds or licensing, or they've allowed for the Pinnacle to do that because what I always heard about Rifts, all these books are awesome, the setting is awesome, the rules kind of suck, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say
I don't
that's
know if that's true. I honestly don't know if that's true or not because I've never played. But maybe the Savage Worlds kind of has giving it some more emphasis. And then, like for me, then I'm going to go track down. Well, they haven't made a book for this section in Rips, or or this part of the multiverse. So I'll go try to track down as a PDF or at half price books or something the original version. Like I've gotten all the vampire books that way, and I want to run something in the vampire territories in Rifts, right? And now I got the rule set that's a little easily accessible to people to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian says buying RPGs and playing RPGs are two different worlds, and that's
Yeah,
pretty much
yeah,
true
true.
because I've
Yeah, look at my
I've bought a
shelf
lot.
back there, right? Look at my shelf. You can
Yeah.
see it.
I've bought a lot of books over the years. I mean, in PDFs, I feel like the digital thing, I want to say worse because like having more materials never bad, but I think it's one of those things too where you could just either through Humble bundles or through anything, you can just end up with just mountains of PDFs. And I've probably read like 1% of the PDFs that I have bought or been gifted or been something. It happens, but it's kind of it's one of those questions I would be interested to go back and talk to, like track down someone like the people on these kind of systems that I felt like had visibility, but I just never got involved. Like Torg was definitely one. Rifts was definitely another one. I did always hear that either not that I don't even know if it was that the mechanics in Rifts were just bad, but just really complicated, which I suppose is maybe means just if it's at the point where it's. I don't know if it's incomprehensible or not. Maybe it's just the same as saying it's bad. But yeah, it would definitely seem to be a thing that Rifts was kind of held back or at least kind of kept in a particular niche because of how the mechanics worked. But
and they have some really neat stuff. I mean, like Palladium Fantasy is really cool looking. I mean, I love the idea of that Wolfen Empire, right? And then like they have like After the Bomb and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff. But I think I don't know.
I mean, everyone's got their core thing. I have not done like 2D20 yet. I haven't even read any of the Modiphius 2D20 books yet.
Yeah.
So there's tons of things out there with people. Right. It's just always interesting because there's just certain systems you hear about a lot, and there are other systems that are out there and clearly, making enough money and stuff to be able to keep producing content, but you just don't kind of hear about them at all.
Right.
Savage Worlds thing is interesting because it's one that I do hear about. I will hear people saying like, oh, you should try Savage Worlds, or people say I'm looking for something that does this or that, and I will hear a lot of you should check out Savage Worlds. I mean, that's why I ended up buying the book at some point, but I never got around to it. So I appreciate you shedding some much needed light, if only for me, and hopefully for other folks who find this at some point, who may be wondering, like, yeah, I've heard about Savage Worlds too, but I didn't know what it was about, or
Oh, there even is a, like, speaking of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there even is a Savage Sewer Creatures for Savage Worlds.
So you can see that's when you should mash out with your post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
The reason why they're coming out of the sewers is nuclear, nuclear radiation.
Right.
Well, listen, it was awesome for you to come on. I really appreciate talking. Is there anything else you want to mention? Anything, any points on your list of Savage World stuff you didn't?
No, I think I had 3 points, and we kind of talked about all them 3? A lot. Yeah, I got
anything else you want to mention about yourself? Anything you're doing? You want to share? Plug? Just mention.
You asked about the games I'm running. So, other than I think the only one I mentioned, I run a lot of games. I guess, hit me up on I'm GMologist. I'll just kind of GMologist presents on Anchor. I have a Twitter GMologist as well, and hit me up on the various Discords. I'm on the Audio Dungeon Discord and on a lot of other Discords. So hit me up.
Yeah, a lot of good folks on the Audio Dungeon Discord.
Hit me up if you want to play some Savage Worlds or other games. I run a lot of games. I don't want to list them all. It'll drive me.
I don't know if there's a public invite for Audio Dungeon or how that works.
I believe there is.
All right. Search it out. If I can find it, I'll plug it because it is a good community of folks. A lot of creators on there.
That's how I met Todd.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I first put my call out for folks to do this series. Well, man, it was really cool connecting with you. I'm happy to have you on. If you want to talk about other stuff, I forget there was something we mentioned early on that I thought that would be a whole other discussion to talk about. Adversarial GMs. Yeah, maybe I can get like Daniel from Bandit's Keep or something. We could do like a 3-man round table on that.
Jason.
Well, folks, thanks everyone who hung out. Hope if some folks had been curious about Savage Worlds that they give it a shot and check it out because it seems a lot of fun. Other than that, game on, and I'll talk to everybody later.